listeners, welcome to our new episode, and we are going to discuss more about the main direction of virtue ethics. And I will begin with eudaimonism, which is an ethical theory that maintains that happiness or eudaimonia is reached through virtue. Eudaimonia and alert are two central concepts in ancient Greek ethics. Eudaimonia, which literally means having a good guidance spirit, is often translated into English as happiness. And while this is adequate insofar as it goes, it does not entirely capture the meaning of the Greek word. One important difference is that happiness seems closely bound up with a subjective assessment of the quality of one's life, whereas eudaimonia refers to an objective, desirable life. Eudaimonia is then a more encompassing notion that happiness, since bad events that do not contribute to one's experience of happiness do affect one eudaimonia. All ancient ethical theorists understand eudaimonia to be the highest human good, but they differ from one another regarding on how to achieve it in its relation to alert. Specifying the relation between these two central concepts is one of the important preoccupations of ancient ethics and subject of much disagreement. As a result, there are various forms of eudaimonism. Two of the most influential forms are those of Aristotle and the Stoic. Aristotle talks virtue and its exercises to be the most important constituent in eudaimonia, but does acknowledge the importance of external goods such as health, wealth, and beauty. By contrast, the Stoics make virtue necessary and sufficient for eudaimonia and thus deny the necessity of external goods. Eudaimonism has been largely forgotten since the Renaissance, but it has seen a revival at the middle of the 20th century, thanks to the works of ethicists such as Elizabeth and Scott and Celia Magnet. Perhaps one task of contemporary eudaimonism is to remember the ancient Greek ethics and the studying of eudaimonia as rooted in the form of good. Or the contemplative activity of God. As we know, everybody is longing for happiness. Happiness is for everything. Let us now check about agent-based theory. Agent-based virtue ethics is an unitary normative theory according to which the moral status of an action is entirely dependent upon the moral status of an agent's motives and character traits. One of the problems of such approach faces to capture the common sense distinction between agents and doing the right thing and hard doing for the right or wrong reason. Let us now look about ethics of care. What do you mean by ethics of care? The moral theory is known as the ethics of care. Implies that there is moral significance in the fundamental elements of relationships and dependencies in human life. Normative care ethics seeks to maintain relationships by contextualizing and promoting the well-being of caregivers and care receivers in a network of social relations, most often defined as a practice or a virtue rather than a theory as such. Care involves maintaining the world of and meeting the needs of ourselves and others. It builds on the motivation to care for those who are dependent and vulnerable, and it is inspired by both memories of being cared for and idealization of self. Ethics of care, also called care ethics, feminist philosophical perspective that uses a relational and context-bound approaches towards morality and decision-making. The term ethics of care refers to ideas concerning both nature of morality and normative ethics theory. The ethics of care perspective stands in stark contrast to ethical theories and rely on principle to highlight moral action such as Kantian deontology and utilitarianism and justice theory. It is not meant to be absolute and incontrovertible, following in the sentimentalist tradition of moral theory. Care ethics affirm the importance of caring, motivation, emotion, and the body in moral deliberation, as well as reasoning from particulars. There are 3 critical steps on the way to formalize care as a coherent ethical orientation. Each is a shift away from traditional ethics. 1. At the center of attention, independent actors are replaced by web interrelated individuals. The impartial application of abstract principle is replaced by the maintenance and harmonizing of human relationships. Ethics is less about the fair imposition of rules and more about crafting social integration. Tension between the light of individual get replaced by conflict responsibility to others in establishing relationships. All ethical tensions aren't my lights version yours, it is me being torn between those I care for. Individuals have with other humans in suggesting that caring is a universal human attribute. Nodding asserted that caring relation or a relationship in which people act in a caring manner is ethically basic to humans. Since the impulse to care is universal, caring ethics is freed from the charge of moral relativism to the same degree as virtue ethics. Our listeners, that is the end of our second episode.